Good evening. I now call the May 24th meeting of the Wallingford-Swarthmore School Board to order. In opening, as you're willing and able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like to ask Ms. Fagora to take the roll call.
Dr. Grandy, before I begin, I wanted to let you know that I have the executed oath of office properly administered and subscribed to by Mary Jo Wachowski-Smith on May 11th, 2021. Pursuant to sections 315, 321, and 322 of the Pennsylvania Public School Code, Ms. Wachowski-Smith fulfilled the requirements to be seated on the board. The executed oath is attached to the minutes of the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Fagora, and welcome, Mary Jo.
Mr. Ballas,
Here.
Ms. Semino,
Here.
Dr. Huff,
Here.
Mr. Cudas.
Here.
He said here. Mrs. Lentz,
Here.
Mr. Sullivan,
Here.
Mrs. Walkman,
Here.
Ms. Wachowski-Smith,
Here.
Dr. Grandy.
Here.
In place of Mr. Berman today, we have Michelle Mintz. Dr. Palmer,
Here.
Ms. Patel.
Here.
Dr. Grandy, we have 9 voting members present.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fagora. And before we get started tonight, I just wanted to ask all board members, for our members here in person, it is sometimes hard to hear our voices if we don't get really close to our microphone. So when you do speak this evening, try to get your microphone very close and speak up as much as you can. There's no problem hearing at home, but there is some challenges in the room. So let's start with our student representatives report. Ms. Patel.
Hi. So first, SRS received a heartfelt thank you from the American Health Association for their donation of $3,210 from the school's recent Kids Heart Challenge / American Heart Challenge event. The efforts of SRS families and students make a tremendous impact and help millions of Americans through increased awareness of cardiovascular disease, life-saving scientific research, and critically needed education efforts. At WES, for their Spring Citizenship Project, in anticipation of spring cleaning, the PTO will assist the students of WES in collecting and donating shoes. Please help WES raise funds by donating pairs of gently worn used and new shoes. They are accepting both adult and child sneakers, boots, flats, sandals, high heels, flip-flops, slippers, and water shoes. The collection will end Friday, May 28th, and there's still lots of time to contribute. There will be boxes in the West Lobby for in-person and online academy families. At NPE, the Social Justice / Teaching Tolerance Committee has recently been working on finalizing an outline of grade level read-alouds and activities for the upcoming school year. Each domain, identity, diversity, justice, and action, will receive a 3-month curricular focus during the 2021/2022 school year. The committee spent time reviewing literature and lesson plans compiled by the WSSD DEI committee, which focus on the teaching tolerance domains and standards. Several stories have been selected at each grade level to promote conversations on diversity, equity, and inclusion through read-alouds and classroom activities. The next school year will begin with a focus on identity. Some of the texts that have been chosen for grade levels include the name jar, the invisible boy, and the sandwich swap. At the high school, since seniors graduate on June 10th, This will be the last meeting I report at. As I know that we are all already aware of, this year has presented tons of new challenges at every level in the district. Despite this, the student council team has found ways to adapt and create to move forward with our mission of ensuring a more unified and overall more positive school environment. For tonight, I worked with Annie Otzevez, the student council president this year, to come up with some of the highlights from the student council. We unintentionally found that one word sums up many of our accomplishments, and that word is connectedness. So first, we started off the school year strong with our new freshman mentoring program. Student council officers were divided and each assigned a freshman English class to mentor, as I've spoken about before. The purpose of these sessions was to bridge the gap for those graduating from the middle school to the high school, which is important every year, but especially necessary this year, considering freshman students started their high school experience without ever coming to the high school. These mentoring sessions allowed freshmen to connect with seniors and have their questions answered, and ultimately ensured that to them they know that Strathaven is the school they belong at. The student council would like to thank the freshman English teachers for being flexible with us and letting us take up some of their valuable class time. We hope that next year's student council is able to continue these sessions. Next, as we've all learned, it's a lot harder to have school pride when you're not in the same physical space as many of your classmates. That's why I think the first in-person ever event student council organized, which was our movie night, was especially significant. Students watched The Sandlot while student council officers walked around with snacks, and everyone was able to have fun and remain masked and socially distanced. Also, throughout the school year, student council officers have collaborated to keep the student council Instagram account up to date. While it may not sound like much, officers have had to coordinate to take turns reading the announcements and posting important information, which proved to be especially helpful considering the frequent schedule changes this year. Undoubtedly, social media is a powerful way to connect people. And this year, when many students have felt the emotional toll of being physically disconnected, the Instagram account has been an overwhelmingly positive way to bring students together and keep them informed about events happening in the district. The last thing I wanted to touch on was the student council sponsored goodie bags for teachers during Kindness Week. While we all know our teachers deserve the world every year, students have a reason to be especially appreciative this year. The student council would especially like to thank our supervisors, Ms. Esposito and Ms. Shaliga, for all of their help, advice, and support. With that recap of this year's student council, I'm excited to share that elections for next year's officers, president, vice president, and of course the school board representative who will replace me is underway. There are over 40 incredible candidates with so many bright ideas to continue making Strathaven the best school it can be. Haven freshmen, sophomores, and juniors have the opportunity to vote today and tomorrow, and results should be available by the start of next week. That's it. Thank you so much.
Do not leave.
Yeah, you can't run away.
I was waiting for you. As Mira said, this is her last board meeting with us, and I would like to take a moment to formally recognize her for her outstanding service in the role as student board representative. And whether she reports in person or on Zoom, her reports have been comprehensive, fact-filled, up to the minute, relevant, and interesting. And since she reports before I report, she's really a hard act to follow. So on behalf of the school board and the district, we present you with a plaque to thank you for your service and recognize all of your efforts in keeping our board and our community informed. We will miss you, and we wish you the very best as you go off to Georgetown next year. May I have a round of applause for Mira? Thank you. Rarely do we get to surprise someone, and I think I did surprise Mira.
So thank you, Mira, for that report. And again, I would just echo what Dr. Palmer said. It certainly has not been the easiest year to volunteer your time and service, but it is certainly deeply appreciated. And the district is certainly much better off having you served in this role over the past year, and we all thank you. But with that, let's move on to our superintendent's report. Dr. Palmer.
So the first item I have now is also a cause for celebration, and it's a COVID-19 update. And that's not normally something you say as a cause for celebration, but our COVID statistics in Delaware County are way down, and I can count our WSSD numbers on one hand. So let me recap for the community. In Delaware County, our incident rate per 100,000 is 45.88, and our percent positivity is 3.1%. In WSSD, our incidence rate per 100,000 is 14.25, and our positive test count is 3. So we've been better than we've been, but we're not out of the woods yet. I still consult with the Delaware County Superintendents, the Chester County Health Department, Drs. Brennan and Dr. Rubin on a weekly basis. We're still using our mitigation strategies such as our hygiene practices, our cleaning practices, social distancing, and masking. We're also still contact tracing. The CDC does recommend that school districts stay the course through the end of the school year, and so does the Chester County Health Department, except in a few instances, and I want to highlight them. So in the area of contact tracing and exposure to COVID-19, for fully vaccinated individuals, and that means 2 weeks following your second shot, if you're in a 2-shot series, or 2 weeks following your 1 dose, if you're in a single vaccine, and you remain asymptomatic. If you have an exposure, you do not need to quarantine. Secondly, for individuals who test positive and have recovered from COVID-19 in the past 3 months, and you remain asymptomatic, the Chester County Health Department has said that you do not need to quarantine either if you're exposed to a positive or a probable COVID-19 case. And the third piece is for individuals who test positive for COVID-19 antibodies, don't have to quarantine either under certain circumstances. So we know if we have our contact tracing and we come across individuals who fall into one of those 3 categories, they don't have to quarantine. But if they do not fall in those categories, we are still quarantining children or staff members if they are exposed. The second area falls into the area of masking. And the Chester County Health Department has made the following changes relative to masking, and I'm going to take the time to read them in case anybody has not read what the Chester County Health Department guidance is. Any student engaging in high exertion outdoor activities, including but not limited to athletics, exercise, or play activities, is not required to wear masks when actively engaged in those activities. They also make the same statement relative to staff. And I'm going to stop and give you the benefit of the conversation that I had on one of our weekly conversations with Jean Franklin from the Chester County Health Department. When she discussed this particular conversation or this particular change with us, she stressed that it pertained to high exertion outdoor activities, such as participating in athletics. She gave us the example of not masking while you're in a game or actively engaged in a practice, but still masking if you're on the sidelines or if you're in the dugout. And then she also said each school district needs to make their individual determination. So to see how this would affect our students, we, and when I say we, I say our pandemic team, our principals, and our nurses, met to see which activities fell into the high exertion outdoor activities. And we determined that it only pertained to our secondary athletics. For us, this means that we're no longer requiring our middle school or our high school athletes to mask while they are actively engaged in a game or practice. However, if they are on the sidelines, in a dugout, walking to or from a practice or a game, traveling on a school bus to or from practice or a game, they are required to wear their masks. On our weekly calls, we also talked about what the fall will look like. And this, I think, is really important and on everyone's mind. We're all cautiously optimistic that things will look very close to a typical year. And as we discussed at our last board meeting, we are planning for our children to return to full in-person learning. What we don't know, though, is will they be masked And will they be required to have social distancing? And we won't know more about that until the summer. But what we do know is that our students in the high school who wish to be vaccinated can be. And based on the figures from our own student vaccine clinic, we know that they are. We also know that a large majority of our middle school students have received their first vaccination already, many of whom received them on Saturday with us. And we anticipate that 70% of our middle school students will be eligible to be vaccinated by the first day of school. What we don't know yet is when the vaccine will be authorized for children under the age of 12. I would love for it to be available by the start of school, but I have not heard that it will be. But in any event, we know that we can successfully have all of our elementary students in school 5 days a week, even if they have not been vaccinated yet. So the future looks really bright for us for next year. We are planning for our kids to return to full in-person learning 5 days a week and with lunch at the high school. So stay tuned for some more updates on that. So before I leave the topic of COVID, I must say thank you to several folks. On Saturday, we held our student vaccine clinic for the second shots for our children 16 years and older, and for the first shots for our children aged 12 to 15. It was amazing to see how many families signed up. Thank you to Springfield Pharmacy for partnering with WSSD and all of the Delaware County schools to make sure all of our eligible kids received their vaccinations. Thank you also to the many, many volunteers who made our clinics possible. When I sent out the all call for medical volunteers to assist with our clinics, I had no idea how many medical professionals were in our community and who were willing to assist. With everyone's assistance, our clinics would, without everyone's assistance, our clinics would not have been possible. And on behalf of all of our families, thank you all so very much for partnering with us. And while I'm thanking folks now, I'd like to thank a couple more. So on our agenda tonight are 2 donations. And I'd like to thank Mr. Pignataro for his generous donation of a Otto Altenburg piano to Strathaven High School. And then I'd also like to thank the Giant Company, as in Giant Food Stores, for their generous donation of over $15,000 to our food service program. Through their Feeding School Kids initiative, the Giant Company and their customers have raised more than $3 million to address the issue of childhood hunger. And they've done that through local public school districts in the communities they serve. And this occurred whether one was rounding up their grocery purchase or they were converting one's choice points. All of that money was matched by Giant and then donated to the local school districts. And it was also very nice to see Rose Welke, a 2002 Strathaven graduate, also from the Giant Company, who came out to present us with our money. So that was just a little extra sweet. And since I just mentioned the agenda, I'd like to mention a couple more items. So on our agenda this evening under the policy section, we have 16 policies for second reading, and we have 16 policies for third and final reading. And all of the policies are the same that we had at the last board meeting, except one, and that is policy 808, food services. We made one revision to that particular policy to the non-discrimination clause, and we made it more broad. So moving off of the topic of the agenda for the moment, I'd like to update the community regarding litigation brought against the school district by one of our neighbors. So last week, the parties completed our respective presentations before Delaware County Court of Common Pleas Judge Spiros Angelos related to the position for permanent injunction filed by neighbors who live on Copples Lane, seeking to restrict curricular and extracurricular school activities, including our band and various athletic events at King Field. As the local community is well aware, our high school marching band and football team have played under the lights on King Field for close to 40 years. Judge Angelos did not immediately rule on the injunction request. Counsel for the neighbors requested, and the court granted the opportunity to file another brief. The neighbors' brief is due on June 3rd, and the school district's response is due 15 days later, which would be June 18th. We expect Judge Angelos to rule at some point after the final brief is submitted. And while the school district remains disappointed that the neighbors continue to attempt to eliminate our ability to use King Field as an important part of our school's student experience, we'll continue to do our best efforts to remain good neighbors to all who live in the immediate area surrounding the field. And speaking of King Field, I'm on a roll, Dr. Grandy, and I'm almost done. Speaking of King Field, I must say last week was a very special week because it felt like we were back in school in a year without COVID. I had the opportunity to start my week by seeing our girls lacrosse team compete amazingly well in their victory over Marple Newtown. And I ended my week by attending the marching band mini season showcase, which was so very special. Seeing and hearing our band march into the stadium literally gave me goosebumps, and I had tears in my eyes. I think these were particularly emotional events for me because I was spending my days in court trying to defend our use of King Field and talking about what a dramatic impact it would have on our students and our school programs if we could not use it. I cannot imagine that our district will be ordered to restrict our own activities on King Field. And I'd like to end my report tonight celebrating our student athletes. So I'm wishing good luck to some teams. First, our girls lacrosse team will be playing tomorrow in the Division I semifinal at 7 o'clock on King Field. Our baseball team, who are the Central League champions and the #1 seed in District 1, will host the winner of the Radnor and Unionville game on Wednesday in the District 1 quarterfinal. And I am hoping it is really good news for our softball team who played today at 4, and I don't know the outcome of the game, but I am hoping they won, fingers crossed. Also, a few more good luck go to our girls and boys track. For our girls track, who are the Central League champions, we have 3 who are advancing to the States on Saturday. We have Olivia Dumont, who won the Division I Javelin Championship. We have Tegan Seidner, who finished 2nd in Division I for the 100 hurdles. And Alexa Brown finished 3rd in the District 1 for the shot put. Under boys track, who finished 2nd in the Central League, we have Enrico Faccio, who finished 2nd in the 110 hurdles, and all 4 of them will advance to the States on Saturday. Special congratulations, though, to a few of our sports teams as well, because I had not mentioned them before, and I thought I would do it now before the year is out. First, to our boys lacrosse team, who made it to the playoffs, defeated Central Bucks, and then lost to Radnor last Thursday. But congratulations to them for moving on to the States. And in our winter season, we had Sydney Bergstrom in girls swimming, who won the state and the division championships in the 500 freestyle. On our wrestling team that finished 2nd in the Central League, we had Chase Barlow and Kelton Brunner, who qualified for states, and Chase went on to finish 7th at 152 pounds. And then in our last piece that I'd like to mention, we have 2 Central League champions in the fall season with the girls cross country and the golf team. So special well wishes to our teams that are still competing, and very special congratulations to our athletes. Dr. Grandy, that completes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer. It's exciting to hear about all those achievements of our student athletes and others, and it's just exciting to hear about students being able to be out doing things that are familiar to them from before COVID. I do want to just, because there's been some questions about some of the, recent changes around COVID, just ask if any board members have any questions for Dr. Palmer based on that update that she just provided. And I actually have one quick question. I'll give people a chance to think if they have any questions. You're still meeting with Chester County Health Department each week, getting updates from them at this point? That's still happening. Okay. And so any changes they make, they're communicating with all the districts on a weekly basis.
Oh, yes. And more frequently, if they need to, they'll send us an email.
Okay. And I guess there was some questions about high exertion. And when they made those changes, did they give some sense of what they mean? I guess you gave some examples there that was their recommendations in terms of how to apply.
That was exactly the conversation that she had to when they're in the game versus when they're specifically on the sideline or in the dugout. So I
Okay.
brought that back to the team when we were talking about it to look at what activities do we have in total that fall into that category.
Okay, thank you. Any board members have any questions before we?
So I have a question. What is the masking protocols inside the buildings?
Inside the building, we're all wearing our masks. There has been no
No
Movement.
exceptions?
no exceptions.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up to that, it seems like we have some audience members who don't have masks tonight. Do we have extras we can lend them?
We should have a box of them. I don't know who has it with them tonight, but we are fully masking.
Thank you.
Mr. Abbott, are you in the room? And I apologize if we are not. And I only say that I don't know if Mr. Abbott has it with him tonight. It looks like he may be getting them.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Kelly?
Dr. Palmer, the vaccination clinic that we had on Saturday, do you have a rough estimate of how many people were vaccinated on Saturday?
I do. We were over 700. And I should also say Dr. Grandy and Mrs. Walkman were both there. Thank you both for coming out and volunteering with us at the clinic. But we had over 700 on Saturday.
Any other questions for Dr. Palmer? All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right, that takes us to board announcements. The board met in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss litigation and negotiations. And so that takes us to our one focus topic on the agenda for the evening, which I'll invite Dr. Palmer back up to the podium to introduce.
I think it was faster for me to just come right up here and introduce Ms. Q as she's coming up here, and then I'll go back to my seat. We had Ms. Q, our business administrator, with us at the last board meeting to go over a pretty in-depth conversation about where we are on the final budget for 21-22. Tonight, she's just going to go through the highlights because tonight the board is actually taking action that will trigger us putting our final budget on public display and then moving toward the counting to when the board can actually adopt the final budget. So for anybody who wanted the full presentation, it's on our website on board docs at the last meeting. And then tonight is a little higher overview. So, oh, I do see Martha behind me. So Martha, I'll turn the microphone over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Since I was here 2 short weeks ago, I will keep this brief. This is the proposed final budget. Between today and June 28th, we will continue to analyze the revenues and expenditures to further hone the final budget. There are still several unknowns still affecting this budget. These include the final county assessment numbers and homestead breakouts. These are vital numbers in order to set the final millage rate and the high school property tax reduction and the Wallingford property tax reduction. State revenues, including basic education subsidy, special education subsidy, and other state revenues. The federal revenues, including various title programs, as well as the federal COVID relief, funds that are referred to as the ARP ESSER or ESSER 3. Although I will say literally just before I came to meetings, the state has released the final allocations for the ARP ESSER funds. This budget is based, as Dr. Palmer referred to, a full return to school for the 21-22 school year. It does also include the cyber option that was approved at a prior board meeting. The district intends to continue the seamless summer options for food service for the 21-22 school year. This means that any child 18 years of age or under is eligible to receive a free breakfast and a free lunch, regardless of the income. However, we will be reopening the a la carte service in all buildings. It may look a little bit different, only prepackaged items, no salad bar. We are waiting on guidelines from the CDC and the Chester County Department of Health, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Department of Food and Nutrition over the summer to see how these will all play out. As I noted, I will be adjusting this budget right up until the very end so that what is being presented is as accurate as possible in June. So let's briefly review the revenues. Local revenues make up just over 79% of this budget. State revenues are just over 19%, and the federal revenues make up 1/3 of 1% of the entire revenue budget. The last piece of this pie is for our use of fund balance to balance our budget, and that's approximately 1%. Our expenditures, salaries and benefits make up approximately 70% of the budget. Purchase services, almost 17%. Debt service and fees make up over 9%. Supplies are just under 3.5%. And the budgetary reserve represents less than 1/2 of 1% of the total budget. The total budget is $89,096,861. At this moment, the district is using fund balance to pay normal operating costs instead of saving those funds for those large unexpected items. The current proposed final budget has a structural shortfall of $943,000 caused by our yearly expenditures exceeding our yearly revenues. This will leave a fund balance of approximately $5.4 million. I do want to point out that although the fund balance is 9.4, if we don't use that budgetary reserve that I referred to in an earlier slide, the fund balance would be more like $5.8 million. Let's talk about the countywide reassessment. We are still finalizing the reassessment values, but at this point in time, the district went from $1.4 billion in assessed value to $2.6 billion. If we reset the millage rate based on the current assessed values that we have, we would go from 48.365 mils to 25.6727 mils. We are eligible for a special ed exception this year. This special ed exception is based on the 2 prior years of special education costs. This is for 1819 and 1920 special education costs. The state sets this comparison and they are using those years. So this exception is basically providing the district funds for the costs that the district has already incurred. This budget includes both the Act 1 index as well as the full special education exception for a total of 1.116 mils or a 4.34% tax increase. Please remember, even with that increase, we are still using almost $1 million from our fund balance to balance the budget. So we're going to go from 48.36 mils. After the tax increase, we will be at 26.7887. To give you an idea of the effect of this, we normally talk about median assessed value. The median assessed value last year was $178,000, almost $179,000. At a millage rate of 48.36 mils, the taxes were $8,653. For the new year, the new median assessed value is $334,000. Using our project millage, it's 26.7887. The new real estate taxes would be $8,959. This is based off of our projected millage rate and the inclusion of the tax increases in that number. So the actual tax increase for that taxpayer is approximately $306. So what's next? Well, today on the agenda is approving the proposed final budget and advertising that budget in preparation for a June 28th final budget. I will be back on June 14th to present that final budget. Hopefully we'll have some of these unknowns resolved by then. Any questions? I said I was keeping it short.
Any questions for Ms. Q? Kelly?
Ms. Q, sorry.
Thought
Can
I'd have to run.
you remind us, the final ESSER grant that may or may not come through? It sounded like you said that there were some
The
allocations
state
made today.
Literally, just shortly before the meeting started, released the final numbers, the final allocation. So It looks like it's happening. They're starting to release the guidelines, although I thought it was funny that they were talking about they've opened up the grant application site, but they have not released the guide for implementation of the grant. So it's kind of funny. I can apply for the grant, but I haven't been told how I can use it.
Right.
So I'm not quite sure how that works, but that's okay.
And if we were to get full grant funding for what we've already applied for, I think there's some that's still outstanding, if I'm correct. That
Mhm.
would be approximately how much? Sorry.
I didn't bring all of my COVID numbers
Yeah.
with me. I honestly,
It doesn't make, at the end of the day, it's not making a difference, a material difference, though, in what we've put on the table in terms of the impact to the budget and the related tax increase.
for the 2021 figures that I presented, I had included all of the grants except this ESER 3.
Right.
Or the ARP.
So that's
ESER.
still for the current year, not
The
the,
ESER 3 is not included in either my projections for 2021, or is that revenue included for the 21-22 year?
I gotcha.
So the 2021 projection does include all of our COVID-related costs that occurred during 2021, too many twos and zeros. But it does not include that grant because we didn't know what the final allocation was and we didn't know what it's going to be used for. And the 21-22 includes $28,000 of the ESER 3 grant relative to our ESY program.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Ms. Q? Okay, thank you, Ms. Q. All right, so that takes us to our first time for audience recognition, which is specifically for response to items that are on the agenda this evening for action. As a reminder, public comment is a time for district residents and taxpayers to speak to the board about an issue that is before the board or may come before the board. It's a time for us to listen and hear perspectives and experiences from our community. And while we can't answer questions at the meeting, there's always an opportunity to follow up after if there's a specific question for the district. For now, we continue to have two methods to comment, in person and by phone. And just a reminder that everyone in person must wear a mask. For phone messages, members of the public wishing to address the board can call 610-892-3470, extension 1102 to leave their recorded comment subject to a 3-minute time limit. Any comments left prior to 5 o'clock on the day of our meeting are transcribed and made available to the board, and any called in after 5 o'clock but prior to the end of the meeting will still be transcribed, distributed to the board, and made a part of the record, but will not be acknowledged during the meeting. I don't believe we have any called-in comments for items for action on the agenda this evening. Is there anyone who would like to, who's in the audience this evening, who would like to speak about a topic on the agenda? Okay, I don't see anyone. So that takes us to our first item for action, which is approval of the May 10th regular business meeting minutes, and I so move.
Second.
Thank you, Matt. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Ballas,
Abstain, I was absent.
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cudiff,
Abstain, I was absent.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Bukowski Smith,
Abstain. I was not yet a member.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
The motion passes 6-0 with 3 abstentions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fagora. So that takes us to personnel, where we have 7 items for action. Are there any on the list anyone would like to separate from the rest? Okay. So we first have approval of 1 retirement, Janice Garrity, a financial clerk in the business office. We have the approval of 1 appointment, Judith Young, instructional support staff at SRS. We have approval of compensation of the student activity advisors for the 2020-2021 school year as stipulated. We have approval of the change of resignation date for Martha Q, business administrator, from August 20th to July 8th. We have approval of the collective bargaining agreement between the district and Teamsters Local 107 for the WSSD bus drivers effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025 as stipulated. We have approval of the collective bargaining agreement between the district and Teamsters Local 107 for the WSSD bus aides effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025 as stipulated. We have approval of the 2021-2025 compensation plan for non-certificated nurses effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025 as stipulated. We have approval of the 2021-2025 compensation plan for confidential executive administrative assistants effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025 as stipulated. We have approval of the 2021-2025 compensation plan for Act 93 administrators effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025 as stipulated. We have approval of the 2021-2025 compensation plan for exempt supervisory employees effective July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2025 as stipulated. We have the approval of the appointment of the accompanist at the high school for the 2020-2021 school year at the rate of $30 per hour, not to exceed a total of 90 hours as stipulated. We have approval of additions to the 2020-2021 academic supplemental postseason pay as stipulated. All items in this section are as attached or described in the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Jerry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Kelly. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cutis,
Aye.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith, Mr. Ballas,
Aye.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
The motion's passed 9-0.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fagora. So that takes us to the policy section on our agenda this evening. As Dr. Palmer mentioned, we have policies on the agenda for their second and for their third reading. And there was just one change that she noted earlier from prior readings. Are there any policies anyone would like to separate from the rest before I read them in? Okay. So first we have approval of 16 listed policies for third and final reading. I'll just read them off quickly. 105 in curriculum, 123.2 sudden cardiac arrest, 137.1 extracurricular participation by home education students, 151 Title I comparability of services, 251 homeless students, 340 responsibility for student welfare, 626 federal fiscal compliance, 803 school calendar, 805 emergency preparedness and response, 805.1 relations with law enforcement agencies, 806 child abuse, 808 food services, 810 transportation, 810.1 school bus drivers and school commercial motor vehicle drivers, 810.3 school vehicle drivers, and 824 maintaining professional adult student boundaries. And then we also have 16 policies for their second reading. Policy 113.1, discipline of students with disabilities, 113.4, confidentiality of special education student information, 218.3, action and placement related to students convicted, adjudicated of sexual assault, 311, reduction of staff, 314, physical examination, 317.1, educator misconduct, 318, attendance and tardiness, 323, tobacco and vaping products, 328, compensation plans, salary schedules, 332, working periods, 334, sick leave, 819, suicide awareness, prevention and response, 904, public attendance at school events, 906, public complaints, 907, school visitors, 913, non-school organizations, groups, individuals. And all of these policies were previously summarized by Dr. Palmer, so we won't go through that again at this time. Do I have a motion for these policies for second and third reading?
So moved.
Thanks, Jen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Marilyn. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cutis,
Aye.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Wachowski Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Ballas,
Aye.
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
Dr. Grandy, the policy items pass 9-0.
Thank you, Ms. Fagora. So that takes us to curriculum. We have 6 items for action in curriculum. Are there any on the list? Anyone on the board would like to separate from the rest? Okay. We have approval of 2020-2021 related services provider contracts as stipulated. We have approval of tuition contracts as listed in the agenda. We have the approval of an educational services agreement as listed under item C and as listed under item D. We have approval of the Strathaven High School Category 1A overnight field trips for the 2020-2021 school year as stipulated. And we have approval of a school calendar revision for the 2020-2021 school year for the high school related to graduation events on June 10th, which shifts June 10th to a half day. And some of the reasons for that have to do with some of the logistical and staffing needs related to hosting graduation ceremonies on King Field that day. All of these items are as attached or described in the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Chapin. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Cutis,
Aye.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Wachowski Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Ballas,
Aye.
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
The curriculum items pass 9-0.
Thank you, Ms. Fagora. So that takes us to finance. We have 14 items for approval in finance. Are there any on the list anyone would like to separate?
I'd like to separate 11F.
11F, okay. Okay, so that's 13 items, which we'll start with, and then we'll come back to item F. So with the approval of payment of invoices to vendors dated April 21st, 2021 through May 18th, 2021. With the approval of the treasurer's report for April 2021, acknowledgement of receipt of financial statements for April 2021, approval of budget transfers as stipulated, approval of the facility usage and rental agreement between WSSD and Trinity Cooperative Day Nursery to occupy a portion of NPE as stipulated, acknowledgement of a receipt of a donation from Giant Feeding School Kids of $15,026.87. That's the one Dr. Palmer mentioned in her superintendent's report. Acknowledgement of receipt of a donation from Mr. Nicholas Pignataro of an Otto Altenburg piano, which was also mentioned in her report. We have approval of removal of obsolete musical instruments from the district by Duffy Piano Movers. We have the approval of the renewal contract with Power School for its Talent Ed student information system, storage and related items for the 2021-2022 school year, not to exceed $105,000 as stipulated. We have adoption of the 2021-2022 proposed final general fund operating budget of $89,096,861 with the following millage rates. Nether Providence Township, Rose Valley Borough, 26.7887. Rutledge Borough, Swarthmore Borough, 27.0309. We have approval to advertise the board's intention to adopt its 2021-22 final general fund operating budget at the Board of School Directors regularly scheduled meeting on June 28th, 2021. And And we have approval of the interim agreement with the Pennsylvania Association of School Business Officials at the rate of $875 per day. And this is to staff the business office with Ms. Q's departure. And then we have approval of an independent contractor agreement with Deirdre Abramson to serve as communications specialist for the 2021-2022 school year as stipulated. All these items in this section are as attached or described in the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jerry. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Ballas,
Aye.
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cudas,
Aye.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
The finance items pass 9-0.
Thanks, Ms. Fagora, and that takes us back to item F, which is approval of the agreement between WSSD and SNR Bus Leasing Company Incorporated for the 2021-2022 school year. Do I have a motion?
So
So-
moved.
Were you,
I was gonna move, but I'll second.
okay, okay, so I'll take. So Kelly, thank you, and Matt.
Because Maryland.
Oh, Marilyn, okay. All right, any discussion? So it was Kelly and then Marilyn. Any discussion?
No, it's Maryland and then.
Oh,
me.
Marilyn. Oh, that wasn't.
I
you. Okay.
I erroneously pointed at Kelly.
All
Sorry.
right, I
It
got
was
you.
Maryland.
All right, so we've got Marilyn, then Matt.
Right.
There we go.
So I separated this out, so I'll start the comments, which is, I note that this covers 11 of our 37 buses. So two things come to mind. One, I'd like to see all of our buses on a similar lease term so that they're all expiring at the same time. And part of that, which is really my second comment, is I'd like to see the district look at alternate technologies for our bus fleet, not just look at diesel, but look at something that's a little greener technology. And so I'd like to use this coming year to look at that, as well as to line up our leases for all of our buses so that if and when we're ready to make that move, we can do it in a nimble fashion.
Dr. Palmer, do you happen to know how our leases line up currently, or is Ms. Q still here?
So I can save Martha the trip to the microphone if that's okay. Our current lease for our other buses was a 4-year lease that we entered last year. So that expires 3 years from now.
Okay, so 3 years to go. Okay. Any other discussion on the bus lease? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Ballas,
Aye.
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cudas,
Aye.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
The motion passes 9-0.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fagora. So that takes us to a section on the agenda titled Other, where we have to take care of some appointments related to individual board roles. And so we'll take them one at a time here. And the first one is the election of the board treasurer. And I would like to call for nominations for the position of treasurer for a term beginning July 1st, recognizing that I hope our current treasurer happily is ready to serve another term, but the nominations are open.
Okay, I would like to nominate Larry Cudas.
Thank you, Marilyn. Are there any other nominations for board treasurer? Okay. So nominations are closed. And so my understanding is we do a roll call here where each board member will indicate their vote for board treasurer. Is that correct? Okay. So Ms. Fagora, can you take the roll call for the board treasurer election?
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith,
I vote for Larry Kunis.
Mr. Ballas,
I vote for Larry Kudis.
Ms. Semino,
Aye, Larry Kunis.
Dr. Huff,
Larry Kunis.
Mr. Cutis,
I'm having a hard time voting for myself, but aye.
You can.
we got an, did we get an aye? Okay. Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Larry Kudis as well.
Dr. Grandy,
Larry Kudis.
Mr. Cutis got 9 votes from the board.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Fagora, and thank you, Larry, for serving in that role again. And then next up, we have the election of the board secretary. I would like to call for nominations for the position of secretary for a term beginning July 1st. And if I may, I will nominate Ms. Fagora for that role. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Well, Ms. Fagora, can you please take the roll call?
Ms. Witkowski Smith,
Aye, Ms. Fagora.
Mr. Ballas,
Aye, Ms. Figura.
Ms. Semino,
Aye, Ms. Fagora.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cutis,
Aye, Mary Fagora.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Mary Figura.
Mrs. Walkman,
Mary Figura.
Dr. Grandy,
Mary Fagora.
Dr. Grandy, it looks like you're stuck with Mary Fagora for another year at a vote to 9-0.
Thank you. All right. Then next up is appointment of in-district representatives. And on this one, I would like to appoint Mary Jo Witkowski Smith to the DEI committee of the board and to the policy committee of the board. Do I ask for a? I don't need anything. Mary Jo, thank you for serving.
You're welcome.
I assume you accept those roles? Okay, thank you. Okay, and then the last item in this section is the election of the DCIU board members. So we have approval of the nominees listed in the agenda to be elected as members of the DCIU board for a 3-year term, beginning July 2nd, 2021 through June 30th, 2024, as stipulated. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Kelly. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Matt. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Fagora, can you please take a roll call vote?
Mr. Ballas,
Aye.
Ms. Semino,
Aye.
Dr. Huff,
Aye.
Mr. Cutis,
Aye.
Mrs. Lentz,
Aye.
Mr. Sullivan,
Aye.
Mrs. Walkman,
Aye.
Ms. Witkowski Smith,
Aye.
Dr. Grandy.
Aye.
Motion passes 9-0.
Okay, thank you. And thanks again to Larry Kutis for serving in that role for our district. So that takes us to our time for audience recognition for response to topics not on the agenda this evening. I do know we have 2 called-in comments that I'll ask Kelly to read into the record this evening. But we also have time for anyone who would like to speak in person about anything that may come before the board in the future. Do you want to go ahead and read the first one while we wait and see if anybody wants to comment? Thanks.
This is from Joanna McGowan, Waterville Road in Wallingford. I have kids at NPE and in the middle school, and I'm calling to leave a comment for tonight's board meeting. I would like to express my concern that the school district has not yet addressed the updated school masking policy to reflect the updated Chester County Health Department guidance. The new guidance states that any staff or students engaging in high exertion outdoor activities, including but not limited to athletics, exercise, or play activities, is not required to wear masks when actively engaged in those activities. This includes outdoor recess, activity periods, and PE classes. We've been repeatedly told that the school board measures were made and considered in accordance with CCHD guidance, so I'm failing to understand why after over 2 weeks, this is yet to be addressed. This seems particularly cruel to our children as the weather gets warmer, which puts our kids in an elevated risk of heat stroke and heat exhaustion. Studies have demonstrated that wearing sweaty outdoor wet masks increases bacteria and is more dangerous than not wearing a mask at all. Additionally, the mental health of our children is at risk. Kids need to reconnect with one another, to socialize on the playground, and to see one another's faces. This is critical to normal childhood development, but even more so to help them re-engage in normal life and help mitigate PTSD in both physical and mental manifestations from the pandemic. As we've seen from recent CDC and news updates, the risk of outdoor transmission is less than 1% and possibly even as low as 0.01%, and this rate is even lower for children. I respectfully request that the school board masking policy be updated immediately, and doing so poses no health risk, is in line with CDC and CCHD guidance, is being implemented by most other area schools, and could reduce so many other serious risks for our children. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and read the second one, because I don't see anyone coming to the podium yet.
This is from Sandy Gatch, 732 Pine Ridge Road, Media, PA. I was calling with regard to masks for our elementary age students at recess and PE. From the beginning of COVID, we've relied very heavily on information and recommendations by the CDC and specifically the Chester County Health Department. This is the reason that our students stayed hybrid for as long as they did. We were going with the recommendations of the Chester County Health Department and keeping them 6 feet apart. The CDC and the Chester County Health Department had recommended that at this point, students should not be wearing masks when they're outside, especially during activities like recess and PE. As the weather continues to get warmer, these last couple days were quite warm. I feel there is much more danger to students becoming overheated, having breathing issues while wearing a mask outside. So I would really ask that the board would consider to follow the science and the fact that transmission outside is less than 1% and continue to follow the recommendations of the Chester County Health Department and allow our elementary age students to remove their masks while participating in recess and PE. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kelly. Do we have anyone for in-person comments? If you want to make a comment, you can go down the hallway and then come around to the podium. Yes, please. Good evening. If you could just introduce yourself with a name and the name of your street.
Hi, my name is Michelle and I live on Chestnut Parkway in Wallingford. The precautionary principle is a philosophical and legal approach to innovations that possess a potential cause for harm when extensive scientific knowledge on the matter is lacking. It is often used in policymaking when there's a possibility of harm and conclusive evidence not yet available. It implies that there is a social responsibility to protect the public from harm when scientific investigation has found a plausible risk. These precautions should only be relaxed when scientific findings provide sound evidence that no harm will result. In shutting down schools and decimating the social lives of children, policymakers rashly abandon this sound principle, instead thrusting children into known scientifically proven harm. It is well documented that social health directly impacts mental and physical health, and the traumatic disruption of social constructs, schools, sports, church, family gatherings has devastating effects, especially on children and teens. Our youth were already suffering epidemic levels of depression, anxiety, addiction, eating disorders, and suicide, yet policymakers such as yourselves choose to exacerbate this devastation on children's mental health, even there was no evidence that returning to normal would pose a risk to them or anyone else. And even as all evidence continued, and to this day shows COVID-19 to pose nearly zero harm to our children, those charged with protecting our children chose harmful and abusive policies. This must stop immediately. Your abandonment of the precautionary principle with regard to our children's health has caused catastrophic consequences that will span generations. The definition of abuse is a non-accidental action which causes or creates substantial risk of physical or emotional injury to a child. Your policies fit this definition. You have violated social, ethical, and professional contracts to keep our children safe and instead used your position to knowingly cast children directly into harm using the classic abuse tactics of psychological manipulation and emotional blackmail. And now it gets worse. Moving beyond this first stage of abuse to an unthinkable act of irreversible harm by promoting, coercing, and further manipulating children to become subjects of massive medical experimentation, using our tax-funded facilities and staff to inject healthy, risk-free children with a risky, unimproved pharmaceutical product. No one has an idea whether these shots will cause infertility or cancer. Once that experimental shot is injected, there is no one doing it. If an entire generation is rendered infertile as a result of this medical experimentation on children, there will be no going back. Remember, the Nazi doctors tried at Nuremberg were not pardoned on grounds that they were just following orders from their superiors. All persons of authority who are complicit in committing these crimes against humanity on our children will be held to account for the irreversible damage inflicted. Our children are not human test subjects for the pharmaceutical industry. Our school tax dollars are not to be spent in promoting, marketing, coordinating, or implementing medical experimentation on children, and especially not within the institutions designed to provide education. We demand that you immediately halt all COVID-19 related restrictions on children within our public school system and prohibit any further promotion on any medical interventions, especially those are which experimental. If the teachers union will not comply with these demands, we urge all of our big-hearted, child-loving teachers to withdraw from these extortionist unions. If a school teacher is fearful of their workplace, then we suggest that they follow an alternative career path rather than insist on the use of
Dr.
practices
Brandy,
that
we're
harm
at 3
children.
minutes.
You have been entrusted with overseeing the education of our children, and that is all. Your uninhibited promotion of pharmaceutical products within our schools is an inappropriate abuse of power and may even qualify as providing medical advice without a license. This must end now. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments? Okay, I don't think we have any other comments. So I'd like to thank our district families that have contacted us this evening. That takes us to our next section on the agenda, which is school board reports. Does anyone have a report from a district subcommittee or out of district role? Okay. Do we have any old business? Do we have any new business? No. Do we have any new business? Okay, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.